The moment his father's custom-built drone shattered against the polished concrete floor, I knew I'd done it right. No one gasped. That was the eerie part. It was like the entire executive floor of Apex Innovations held its breath and forgot how to release it. Ethan Thorne III just stood there, his designer suit jacket askew, his tie a symbolic noose around his inflated ego, staring at the shattered remains of a legacy he'd never truly built. But that wasn't the start. It began precisely 23 days earlier, at 10:17 a.m., when he swaggered into my office as if he owned the very air I breathed. "You're still here?" he asked, not even bothering to take a seat. "We don't coddle the complacent." He didn't smile. Ethan never truly smiled. He merely bared his teeth, and there was a stark difference. I watched his reflection in my monitor as I finalized the quarterly user engagement report, the very one that showed how my division had driven 38% of the company's new user acquisition last fiscal year. He didn't glance at the metrics. He looked at my throat, as if imagining it silenced. "Pack up," he stated, tapping the edge of my desk like a ticking clock. "I need the space for someone with more drive." I didn't argue. That's what made it flawless. No tears, no empty threats, just a slow, deliberate nod, as if I were being released from something toxic. I unplugged my ergonomic mouse, slid my notebook into my bag, and left behind one solitary item: a sleek black USB drive labeled Project Phoenix Q4. He wouldn't touch it, of course, not immediately. He was far too arrogant for that. But he would, eventually, because that's what men like Ethan do. They open things they believe they comprehend. That drive didn't contain project files. It held a single encrypted document. Apex Governance Protocol, Section 9C, PDF. Time-stamped, authenticated, and subtly embedded within a complex software licensing agreement his father had tasked me with overseeing during the pre-IPO chaos. That section was my safeguard. No, my detonator. I had meticulously re-engineered the company's executive succession policy under the guise of streamlining compliance documentation. Section 9C triggered an independent ethics review if any senior employee terminated without demonstrable cause after 5 years of dedicated service filed a formal complaint within 15 business days. It also mandated the immediate suspension of any executive whose name appeared in 3 or more high-risk, undisclosed vendor relationships. Guess whose trust fund baby had been careless with kickbacks from Quantum Connect Solutions? I didn't flee. I waited. First, a profound silence, then a subtle, creeping tension. Compliance officers in the glass elevators feigning disinterest. HR began scheduling routine performance reviews with individuals who hadn't been spoken to in years. And then, the elegant chaos began. Ethan started missing morning syncs. He blamed global time zone shifts. Then, a personal family matter. Then, his assistant double-booked him for a virtual meeting that simply didn't exist. That was when I mailed a single sheet of paper to Ms. Albright, the board chairwoman. It contained one stark sentence: activate Section 9C, or assume full fiduciary liability. No signature, no return address. But they knew. I had used the old, faint watermark from the original Apex letterhead. Now, here's the exquisite part. The chairwoman didn't contact me. She contacted Ethan's father, Arthur Thorne. And that man, Arthur, the titan in a bespoke suit, flew back from his private island retreat in the Caribbean and stormed directly into headquarters. He burst into that office, took one look at the preliminary audit summary, and instantly grasped the full scope of what I had done. Witnesses said his hands trembled. Then came the sharp crack of the drone's frame, the metallic shards scattering across the imported stone tiles when he hurled his own prized possession off the wall. And Ethan, the boy king, he just stood there, silent, utterly pale. You don't dismiss a storm and expect calm skies. And I wasn't finished. The voicemail arrived at 3:07 a.m., just heavy breathing at first, then a faint click, then Arthur's voice, low, raw, stripped of that bourbon-laced arrogance he used to wear like a second skin. "I read it twice," he rasped. "Once as a father, once as a CEO. And both times, Cynthia, I saw it for what it was. A noose." Then silence. No apology, no rage, just that final word, as if it were already tightening. He never called again. By sunrise, the company's stock had dipped 3.5%. A rumor leaked, someone fed it to a prominent tech blog, suggesting a governance disruption was underway. Internally, they called it the Quiet Reckoning. Externally, Apex Innovations issued a press release so sterile it could have been written by a mortician. Ethan wasn't immediately fired. Not yet. That would have been too merciful. Instead, he was sidelined, granted a strategic innovation advisory role, which in Apex lingo meant a glass box with no keys. They placed him in an unused 18th floor executive lounge and told him to brainstorm future-proof efficiencies. He brought in a holographic whiteboard and stared at it for 4 days. Meanwhile, the audit committee reached out to me under the guise of clarifying procedural context. I met them at a discreet law office above a bustling Korean BBQ joint that smelled of grilled meat and existential dread. 3 corporate lawyers, 1 digital recorder, and a woman named Ms. Chen who took notes as if she were etching them into granite tablets. They didn't ask how I planted Section 9C. They asked why. I looked directly at Ms. Chen and said, "Because I was tired of watching boys inherit empires they didn't build." That silenced them. But it was Ethan's mother, Eleanor Thorne, old money, a martyr with diamonds older than my career, who broke the standoff. She appeared at my doorstep wearing a cashmere blazer and eyes like polished obsidian. "I thought you were intelligent," she stated. "But this, Cynthia, this is vindictive." I leaned against the doorframe, my coffee mug still in hand. "Your son called me complacent. I merely showed him what one can do with enough quiet determination." She didn't flinch. "You won't prevail. He's still family, still a thorn." I smiled. "Precisely. And that, Mrs. Thorne, is the problem." Then I gently closed the door in her face. That same week, someone attempted to access my old office. The security footage was mysteriously corrupted, and no one seemed to know who authorized the re-entry badge, but I did. I had left a small, fluorescent sticky note under the bottom drawer handle. It was gone. They were searching for the original contract. Too late. Because I hadn't just hidden the clause. I had replicated it, digitally, physically, and securely. And I had left behind one more ticking surprise. A separate document, time-locked on a private server under my name, encrypted and programmed to release if Ethan took any retaliatory action against any former employees linked to my department. He didn't know it yet, but his career was rigged like a game of Minesweeper, one click away from public detonation. The beautiful part? I wasn't doing any of this from the shadows. I was visible, accessible, laughing with ex-colleagues at trendy brunch spots, publishing subtle LinkedIn updates with veiled jabs hidden in the endorsements. I was haunting him in plain sight. And then the phone rang again. Not from Apex Innovations, but from someone who shouldn't have known my number. Someone whose name hadn't been uttered in that building for years. It wasn't over. It was merely beginning. The name on the caller ID stopped my breath mid-sentence. Silas Blackwood. 8 years ago, he was the phantom behind every major acquisition. The corporate necromancer who transformed bankrupt startups into shareholder fantasies. Apex Innovations had poached him once to dismantle a rival, then buried his name like radioactive waste when he got too close to the family's offshore labyrinth. He wasn't calling to catch up. "Section 9C, he said before I could speak. "Wasn't your first masterpiece, was it?" I stared out the window, watching a pigeon peck at a discarded pastry on the curb. "Depends. Are you calling to threaten me or offer me a position?" He chuckled, a low, calculated sound. Neither. I'm calling to warn you. Eleanor isn't letting this die quietly. She's rousing old guard. I knew exactly what that implied. Apex Innovations didn't just bury secrets, they paid them to stay buried. Former executives silenced, vendors coerced. Two whistleblowers who disappeared into NDA purgatory. And one ex-CFO named Victor Sterling, who had a reputation for making inconvenient clauses, vanish. He was the fixer, and if Eleanor was bringing him back into play, then this wasn't damage control. It was a full-scale counteroffensive. By the end of the week, 3 unsettling things occurred. My LinkedIn profile was temporarily restricted due to a report of suspicious activity. My former team lead, Brenda, texted me a screenshot of her inbox, an internal memo requesting a behavioral performance review of all employees who had worked under me in the past 5 years. And a man in a dark trench coat started appearing outside the yoga studio I frequented on Wednesdays. Same car, same parking spot, same dead eyes. They weren't just trying to clean up the mess. They were trying to erase the very trail of blood. So I did what I had prepared for, but hoped never to execute. I flew to Phoenix. There, in a climate-controlled storage unit rented under my grandmother's maiden name, sat a single manila folder. Inside, printouts, original signatures, audio files, a 12-minute recording of Arthur Thorne making promises during a private investor dinner. Promises involving stock manipulation, offshore laundering, and one very specific phrase. If my idiot son ever takes over, burn it all down. I had been recording before Section 9C was even a thought, back when I still believed I could earn respect the conventional way. This wasn't revenge. This was insurance. But I knew one thing Silas didn't. Eleanor wasn't after control. Not anymore. She was after absolution. She wanted the Thorne name sterilized, scrubbed clean of scandal before the next phase, the major public offering. And a week before the board vote, I received the final confirmation. An unmarked envelope slipped under my apartment door. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a draft press release. Apex Innovations to go public, reimagined, reborn, and reclaimed. And just below that, Ethan Thorne III to be named CEO Emeritus. They were setting him up as a sacrificial icon, a phoenix made of ash and PR spin, which meant they were going to bury everything I had done, rewrite the narrative before it ever reached daylight. So I made one phone call, not to a lawyer, not to a journalist, but to someone I had ghosted for years, my sister. Because she didn't just work in finance, she was the ghostwriter for half the IPO roadshows on Wall Street. And she hated the Thornes more than I did. I hadn't spoken to my sister Sarah in 4 years, not since I missed her wedding to finalize a crucial proposal for, ironically, Apex Innovations. She answered on the first ring. "You either have cancer or a plan," she said. I exhaled. "Both, if you count unchecked capitalism as a terminal illness." She didn't laugh. She never did. Sarah was forged from Wall Street steel and espresso fumes. She edited SEC filings like they were sacred texts and once threatened to staple a managing director's tongue to a prospectus for saying synergy, unironically. "I need you to bury an IPO," I stated. That got her attention. "You want me to sandbag a billion-dollar launch?" she asked, her voice suddenly quieter. "You do realize who you're messing with? Same people who made Dad sell his patent for 10 cents on the dollar in a mug with their logo." Silence. Then, "Send me everything." So I did. Every document, every encrypted email, every suspiciously perfect quarterly report Ethan had filed from his efficiency initiative. We both knew half those numbers were massaged harder than a Hollywood celebrity's ego. Sarah didn't just read between the lines, she carved new ones. 48 hours later, she called me from a burner phone. "You're sitting on enough insider rot to nuke 3 board seats and delay their IPO by 9 months, minimum." "Delay?" I asked. "That's the legal route," she clarified. But if you want scorched earth, I've got something better. Her voice changed then, lower, conspiratorial. They're using a shadow firm in Delaware to reroute IPO shares pre-launch. Shell company. No direct trace. But I traced it anyway. I could feel my pulse quicken. And the firm's registered to a holding entity in Luxembourg. I blinked. So it's listed under an alias I've seen before. Eleanor's. She's planning to divert shares, get out before the audit findings surface. That press release naming Ethan is a decoy. She's not burning him. She's buying time. Suddenly, the puzzle twisted into a devastating weapon. Eleanor wasn't trying to preserve the Thorne legacy. She was laundering it, whitewashing the family name with a farewell tour while cashing out in the background like a magician misdirecting the audience. And Ethan? He wasn't the sacrifice. He was the cover fire. And then Sarah dropped the final match. She's holding a pre-IPO investor mixer next Thursday. Invite only, closed doors, NDAs at the entrance, cameras strictly prohibited. I knew what that meant. It wasn't a party. It was a bloodletting in designer shoes. My sister exhaled into the phone. You want to end this? That's your stage. Crash the mixer, drop your file, and let the sharks do the rest. I won't be on the list. You will now. She sent me a name. Isabel Dorrance, a boutique fund manager with a vintage handbag obsession and an allergy to due diligence. Sarah had ghostwritten 3 of her last earnings decks. She owed her. By Thursday, I had a new dress, a meticulously forged invitation, and a 128 gig drive shaped like a luxury car key. My mission: to hand-deliver hell to the most dangerous woman in the city and make her thank me for the privilege. Because if Eleanor wanted to play legacy games, I came ready to bury hers beneath my heels. The mixer was held inside a converted art gallery, half glass, half ego, with a string quartet playing so softly I wondered if they were paid to avoid making sound. I stepped out of the hired black car at precisely 7:12 p.m., 42 minutes after doors opened. That timing was intentional. Come too early, and you appear desperate. Come too late, and they know you're concealing something. Arrive at the exact point where cocktails dull the senses, but deals haven't yet been inked. That's when the wolves reveal their true nature. My alias, Isabel Dorrance, was printed on a gold-foiled name tag clipped to my lapel. The woman at the door barely glanced up from her tablet as she waved me through. Sarah's contact had done their job. The place smelled of ambition and expensive perfume. Conversations drifted like smoke. Stock rumors, tech layoffs, someone casually mentioning they just acquired a private island to detox from venture capital. I spotted Eleanor by the bar, enveloped in a midnight blue gown that likely cost more than my annual salary. 2 men flanked her, laughing a second too late at her every pronouncement. She hadn't seen me yet. Good. I floated past a group of tech moguls debating the future of AI in real estate, moving directly toward the side corridor marked Staff Only. At the end was a discreet security door guarding the main server room. Eleanor's tech guy had insisted on on-site encryption for peace of mind. Perfect. I paused, pretending to fumble with my clutch, then reached under my sleeve and peeled off the tiny adhesive strip Sarah had given me, a cloned RFID chip tied to one of the catering staff's badges. The lock clicked softly. Inside, humming fans and racks of blinking lights greeted me like old friends. I moved swiftly. The folder on the USB was titled Deep Dive. It contained everything: the vendor laundering patterns, the ghost shares, the Luxembourg routing slips, and one redacted email chain between Eleanor and an anonymous banker arranging early access dividends. I slotted the USB into the main terminal. No hacking needed, just precise timing. The system was syncing a live investor presentation across all rooms. A touchscreen offered 3 stream options: Investor Deck, Public, Investor Deck, Restricted, Emergency Broadcast. Guess which one I chose. 10 seconds later, a flat chime echoed through the gallery, and every screen flickered. Gone were the warm, curated photos of board members shaking hands. In their place, a scanned memo signed by Eleanor herself. Advance allocation to shell accounts. Discreet, as discussed. Gasps. Silence. Then, shouting. One investor hurled their champagne flute against a wall. I stepped back into the main hall, just as Eleanor turned, her expression already contorting mid-word, her eyes locking onto mine. Recognition hit her like a jolt of electricity. "You!" she hissed. "I told you I'd bring receipts," I said, smiling faintly. A man in a pinstriped suit, his SEC badge half concealed behind his pocket square, turned toward her, his eyes wide. "You signed this?" Eleanor didn't blink. "It's fabricated," she shrugged. "Then you won't mind us verifying it against your real server." That was the true beauty of the whole thing. I hadn't just uploaded the file. I had duplicated her entire server onto a mirrored drive and sent a time-stamped copy to Sarah's contact in the press, under the condition it only went live if I didn't text "still breathing" by midnight. Eleanor's lips curled into a sneer. "You think you've prevailed?" "I think I just turned your legacy into evidence," I said. She lunged forward a half step, her hand trembling, but not with rage, with fear. The string quartet had stopped playing, and somewhere in the crowd, someone began to clap. Slow, sharp, deliberate. I turned. Ethan, looking far too composed for someone whose life was now a raging bonfire, was smiling. Ethan clapped like a man who'd finally witnessed the plane crash he'd secretly yearned for. "Bravo," he stated, strolling through the stunned crowd like a snake shedding its skin. "Truly, all these years, and this is what it takes to make my mother finally shut up." Eleanor spun on him. "You knew?" His smile didn't falter. "Of course I knew. You think I didn't notice when our IPO shares started vanishing like socks in a hotel laundry?" Her jaw clenched. "You ungrateful little—" "I'm a thorn," he interrupted, raising his glass in a mock salute. "Ungrateful is in the DNA." Everyone was watching now. Phones recording, whispers ricocheting like shrapnel. No PR team could ever clean this up. This wasn't a leak. It was a detonation. I stood very still, unsure if I was witnessing the unraveling of a dynasty or the opening act of a very ugly encore. Then Ethan turned to me. "I should express my gratitude," he said, sauntering closer, his voice low. "You didn't just burn her. You created space for me. When the board inevitably pulls the plug on her, guess who they'll turn to?" I narrowed my eyes. "You're delusional." "No, Cynthia, I'm inevitable." He leaned in. "And don't think I didn't notice Section 9C. Daddy warned me about your little insurance policy, but guess what? He's gone, and the clause only triggers if I retaliate. What if I simply absorb you instead?" I blinked. "Excuse me?" "I'm offering you a position, EVP of strategy. Same compensation, significantly larger budget. You'd report directly to me. You clearly know where the bodies are buried. Hell, you dug the graves, so join me. Clean it up from the inside. Let the rats drown with her." The sheer audacity stunned me. He wasn't afraid. He was rebranding. This wasn't a concession. This was a hostile takeover in slow motion. Eleanor had been outmaneuvered, and now her son wanted to transform me into his personal dragon slayer. Flip the narrative, whistleblower turned visionary. That kind of garbage headline investors drool over. "I already have a job," I said, my voice cold. "Oh," he replied, sipping his drink. "Do tell, making sure neither of you ever holds power again." His smile faded, just a flicker, but I saw it. You won't truly win, you know, he said softly. People forget. Moneyed legacies, they rot, but they always grow back. Not this time. He stepped closer. Then consider this your only warning. You come at the throne again, Cynthia. I won't use words. I didn't flinch. Neither will I. And then Eleanor snapped. She lunged for the microphone at the front podium like a drowning woman grasping a life raft. Ladies and gentlemen, she declared, her voice trembling. This is a coordinated smear campaign. The documents you saw are maliciously altered and are being handled by authorities as criminal fraud. Too late. Behind her, the main screen lit up again, this time not by me. Incoming call, SEC Enforcement Division. The sound system pinged once. A man's voice crackled through, formal and unbothered. This is Special Agent Miller. We are currently issuing a freeze on Apex Innovations pending IPO review under suspicion of securities fraud, internal laundering, and executive misconduct. Do not attempt to leave the premises. Gasps. Phones lifted. Someone dropped a champagne flute. Eleanor dropped the microphone, literally. Ethan froze. His glass slipped from his hand and shattered against the polished concrete. And me? I pulled out my phone, typed 2 words. Still breathing. Then I turned to leave, but I didn't make it to the door because someone was already waiting for me, and they weren't smiling. He was tall, lean, and dressed like a man who understood the value of silence. No name tag, no drink, just a slate gray suit and eyes like an overcast sky. Ms. Caldwell, he stated, using my real last name, not the alias. I didn't answer. I just kept walking. He stepped in front of me, not aggressive, just immovable. I believe you have something that belongs to us. Wrong sentence, wrong tone, wrong decade to speak to a woman like that. You'll have to be more specific, I said, tilting my head slightly. A conscience? A soul? An actual functioning audit department? He didn't smile. I'm not here to threaten you. That's a relief. Everyone else has dibs. He handed me a card. No logo, no title, just a single line of embossed text. V. Sterling. Victor Sterling, the fixer. Eleanor's last resort. He was real. I used to think he was just a boardroom campfire story, someone you blamed when NDAs erased memories and whistleblowers woke up rich but ruined. What's the play? I asked, slipping the card into my bag. Offer me hush money and a flight to somewhere sunny? He shook his head. I'm not here to stop what you've done. That's already past the threshold. Then why are you here? To stop what you might still do. I felt my jaw tighten. He didn't blink. Like releasing the 3rd archive, the one that isn't in Section 9C, the one even Eleanor doesn't know about. My stomach did a quiet little pirouette, because he was right. There was a 3rd archive, hidden so deep not even Sarah had access. It wasn't about the IPO. It was about the foundation, the political donations, the shell charities, the pipeline of money from Apex Innovations to politicians who later pushed legislation that padded their stock for a decade. Is that a threat? I asked. It's a suggestion, he said, his voice like gravel rolled in velvet. Let the fire burn this high. Don't turn it into a war. I stepped closer. Tell Eleanor wars are how legacies truly end. He tilted his head. Then don't be surprised when no one comes to clean up the ashes. Then he vanished into the crowd like fog through a crack. Outside, chaos, press, flashing cameras, a woman screaming about insider trading, Ethan trying to shout over his own lawyers, Eleanor in a car with tinted windows, refusing to open the door. And me? I walked 3 blocks in heels I couldn't feel anymore. Sat down at a 24-hour diner off Market Street and ordered pancakes I wouldn't eat. I pulled out my phone. One message waiting from Sarah. Still want to nuke the rest? I stared at it for a long time. There were 2 buttons on my drive interface: sync complete and delay release. If I tapped the former, the final archive would hit every inbox from the DOJ to the Times to a podcast that loved turning corporate corruption into 3-part episodes. If I tapped the latter, I could wait, watch, let them twist in the wind, see who tried to crawl back. But then the waitress placed the check beside my untouched pancakes and said, "Whatever you're thinking about, honey, make sure it's worth the silence." And suddenly, I remembered the voicemail. Arthur Thorne's voice. "If my idiot son ever takes over, burn it all down." So I tapped sync complete and watched the world begin to melt. The world didn't explode. Not right away. It cracked. First came the silence, the kind that follows a deep impact. Sarah called it the inhalation period. That eerie hush before panic finds its voice. By morning, 5 journalists had pinged me for quotes. 2 SEC officials requested voluntary cooperation. 1 former board member emailed me a single word: respect. The archive scorched like acid. Every transfer, every dark money pack. A congressional aide named Fisher, whose wife received a 6-figure donation from an Apex Innovations education initiative 2 weeks before she introduced a loophole-laden tax reform. I didn't even know half the names in those files, but someone did, and those were very, very loud. Now, I sat back and let the sharks feed. Ethan was the first to fall. On day 3, the board suspended him pending investigation. On day 5, a video leaked. Him, drunk, ranting in the Apex Innovations executive lounge about how ethics were for interns. By day 7, he deactivated everything but his lawyer's number. Eleanor held out longer, she always did, a spine of diamond and deflection. But even she couldn't outspin the reality of bank transfers traced through 6 countries, all pinging back to a Luxembourg holding firm with her maiden name buried in the fine print. On day 10, she released a statement. "After a lifetime of service, I am stepping away to focus on my family and personal wellness." Translation: the fire reached the penthouse. The company went into freeze mode. The IPO was officially pulled. Half the leadership resigned. The Thorne name, once printed in serif gold on skyscraper plaques and philanthropy walls, is now shorthand for cautionary tales in business schools. And me? I didn't take another job. I didn't sign a book deal. Didn't give an interview. Didn't even update my LinkedIn. I disappeared, but not completely. I bought a little house upstate, something old and crooked, painted the mailbox bright red, and planted lavender around it like my mother used to. Sarah visited once a month, always bringing coffee and headlines. She called it the victory report. I called it inventory, because you don't win wars like this. You survive them. One morning, 2 months after the final archive dropped, a letter arrived. No name, no return address, just a single sheet. "Thank you. You finished what I was too afraid to start. R." I hadn't heard from her since the deposition. She'd vanished after the fallout, presumably somewhere safe, somewhere quiet. Seeing her handwriting hit harder than I expected. I folded the letter twice, and once more, and slid it into a drawer next to Arthur's voicemail. Still saved on a burner phone I kept powered off. Not because I needed to hear it again, but because there are certain ghosts you don't delete. That night, I poured a glass of wine and watched the stars melt into the river below the hill. A fire cracked nearby. The air smelled like cedar and endings. I didn't smile. I just breathed. Because legacy is a funny thing. Sometimes it dies with a name. Sometimes it's rewritten by the woman they called complacent, the one who left quietly and lit the fuse on her way out.